Welcome back, divers. In the previous two videos, we navigated through the available options to solve an out-of-gas scenario. Let's start with a brief summary of these videos. Being out of gas is the most frequent known cause of diving fatalities. Probably unexpectedly, statistics show that many accidents happen even when divers are simply low on gas. The buddy breathing procedure, which involves divers alternatively breathing through one regulator, was too dangerous and has been discontinued, giving way to the compulsory second regulator that permits both divers to breathe from the same cylinder. The basic configuration of a set of regulators provides that one hose is longer than a normal one. The two main decisions divers must make in such scenarios are from which regulator of the donor the receiver will breathe, and which diver is in charge of grabbing or passing this chosen regulator. Logic states that divers engaged in this stressful scenario should choose the least stressful solution. It also suggests that the donor is under less stress than the diver who is out of gas, or even just low on it. The hose of the alternative gas source is usually longer than that of the main regulator, and having at least one diver always being able to breathe normally should reduce the level of stress that the team is undergoing. This means receiver breathes through the alternative source of the donor, allowing also more freedom of movement and swim, thanks to the longer hose. Even though it is not part of any learned procedure, reality has shown that the diver more prompt to act usually leads to sharing procedure, leaving the other to accept it. The receiver might grab the regulator by himself if the donor does not recognize the seriousness of the situation. Tech diving is invading recreational diving, and nowadays it is possible to meet recreational divers adopting the typical regulator tech configuration with the long hose, which requires specific training and which may lead to some unexpected ways to use it. Divers might carry a second cylinder to have a completely separate source of gas, becoming independent in case of being low on gas or out of it. Even though it's not always easy or possible to adopt it, it's probably the best solution.
After having explored so many different options and possibilities, it is time to arrive at some conclusions which can serve us during our future dives. And first of all, do not even hope for simplification, it will not arrive. But what may seem to be a shortfall could be the unintentional choice that best fits the current recreational diving community. The out-of-gas scenario has so many variables that make its evolution almost unpredictable. To be in total control of this complex scenario, we only have two options. Either to be so well-trained that we are almost specialists, or we simplify to have fewer available options on which all divers should agree. This would mean that divers would avoid adding any personal touches so as to modify the procedure itself, for example, moving the alternative air source to our left instead of keeping it on our right as expected. And of course, in both cases, we should regularly practice these widely accepted fewer procedures. But both possibilities are in total contrast with the real status quo of the recreational diving community, where divers do not usually review even the most basic and vital procedures and exercises. The majority of us can confirm that divers often rely only on their basic training, as we have seen in the second video of the Purple series. Relying on these premises, a wide range of options, and on a certain amount of luck, will probably work better than a promise of perfection that we cannot keep. What we might deduce from this introduction is that a short discussion in a pre-dive briefing, if any, will not guarantee that in case of an out-of-gas scenario, all divers will perform as they are supposed to. Also, it is not an unrealistic scenario to share gas with a diver who is not even our buddy, the one with whom we have agreed. We might have to share gas with another diver in our group who is acting both as donor or receiver.
Having said that, the first important conclusion we might infer is that sharing gas is not only about mere technique, but a high level of awareness is necessary to guide this scenario instead of merely undergoing it. While, for example, cleaning a mask is something that we could perform automatically without even think about it, the showering gas scenario requires to collect information from outside to be used to decide which is the best option to choose, our lottery win ticket. It doesn't matter how expert we are, do not exist two identical showering gas scenarios. We need information before to take action. But effectively managing our gas in a dive is not only possible, is instead the norm, and divers who run out gas are luckily the minority. But divers do not run out of gas spontaneously, and almost always when a diver runs out of gas, it is due to at least one mistake of the diver himself. So, the first way to deal with this lottery is to avoid playing it at all, avoiding mistakes that are almost always evitable.
Despite we agree or not on the given description of the recreational diving community, we will anyway probably all agree that the gas sharing procedure is something that we should review. There are at least 3 possible levels of review: in water with our buddy, out of water with our buddy, and even out of water alone. And while the optimal situation would be to always dive with the same buddy, this is not the norm for many divers, and that makes practically impossible for them to consistently carry out the review at the first level. While a review out of water with our buddy is theoretically a good substitution for the first, in reality, it is not always done, and many times when it is in fact done, it is done superficially. Often, the best of these reviews are reduced to a question relating to which regulator we have to breathe from in case we need it. We are not saying that this is the right way to do things. What we are saying that there is a big difference between the ideal situations we learn to deal with during our courses and the real world. If we consistently dive with the same buddy or with the same group of divers, we might theoretically be able to avoid this dissonance. Otherwise, like it or not, we have to face it. But we can easily review all the sharing gas options in our mind, refreshing and fixing all the milestones of these procedures, making sure to have a solid knowledge of them, which is crucial when we need to quickly recall it. Without a review, the idea of mastering all these options is probably a false sense of knowledge that may hide many pitfalls. And while for any review which involves other divers, we may find at least one nice excuse to justify why it has not been done, this one, however, involves only us, and we have no justification.
Besides this huge number of available options, the second big variable that plays an important role in an out-of-gas scenario is of course our buddy. That may even be a new diver assigned to us by a dive guide. Having said that, in the same way we instinctively evaluate the doctor who is going to open our knee or drill our tooth, we also always instinctively evaluate our buddies, instructors, and dive guides. It should not happen, but when we hold them to a higher standard, we are often predisposed to delegating important tasks, even the ones that we should not delegate. Even more so, if it's not our regular buddy and we are not in agreement, or the reviews were not done before diving, it's probably better to be the one who leads the procedure instead of being the one who passively has to accept. Often the more prompt and faster diver decides for both. As a donor, by offering the regulator before the receiver is tempted to grab the wrong one. As a receiver, by clarifying that you need the alternative gas source, avoiding the loss of precious time, and if necessary, even grabbing it by ourselves. All this can only be done by developing a high level of personal awareness. The out-of-gas scenario may have so many different ways of showing up that even an expert diver might not be able to act as quickly and effectively as he is supposed to. A frequent mental review of all the available options, added to an active observation and evaluation of our buddy, would offer the best possible protection. And while we might have a good excuse for not reviewing these fundamental procedures together with our buddy, there are no excuses for not spending a little time going through a mental review of them. And even if all this extra work will not be a guarantee, that we will be able to manage all the situations, it's still the best we can do. While we cannot change the imperfect world in which we dive, we can still commit to personal growth. As usual, whether we like it or not, and whether we know it or not, being aware of what diving involves, and assuming the relative responsibilities are both necessary steps to take. After having accepted awareness and responsibility as prerequisites of any of our actions, the rest are mainly mechanical and practical processes that almost everyone can already list by applying a little knowledge and common sense. Let us have a look at the main cases.
Even in cases similar to this catastrophic example, in which a hose has exploded, a certain amount of time elapses before the cylinder gets completely empty, and the amount of time needed to empty the cylinder depends on many factors. And even more so, if such a catastrophic episode does not happen, the time varies from when we identify that we are low on gas to when we switch to a diver out-of-gas scenario. In the majority of the situations, an out-of-gas scenario implies that we have already surpassed the low on gas one. It's like when we see the cars ahead of us reducing their speed. This is a sign that we may need to stop soon, and we act accordingly, without waiting for there to be insufficient room to stop our car. This is how we avoid accidents. A low on gas scenario could be the brake light of the cars in front of us alerting us. We should have recognized the problem before, but we did not, so this is the last call before an accident. And even if we still do not check our gauge, because this is probably the reason why we are now low on gas, the increased effort required to inhale should be able to trigger a reaction. But heavy and bad breathing, often together with too low a level of awareness, is the bad weather conditions that will cover the brake lights of cars ahead, making them invisible.
A widespread vision of our dives, which can be summarized as being aware of what we are doing, will allow better and more efficient management of several diving situations and parameters. A diver who is aware can predict most of the scenarios that will arise, as they occur regularly on each of their dives, and sometimes more than once per dive. Constantly and regularly checking our parameters will prevent problems instead of having to deal with them. Regularly means in agreement with the context, which applies to us, and the diving conditions, and of course, checks are not the goals of our dives. Our goal remains the same, to have fun, whatever fun means for us. Checking our parameters should be easy, and it becomes easier as we check them regularly. Here are some practical tips to complete all this theory and better manage an out or low gas scenario. We should use universal hand signals, and we should use them correctly and clearly, making sure that others will immediately understand our needs. We should have audible signals to attract the attention of our buddy or other divers. Location, as well as an efficient system of retention of the alternative gas source, are important too. Keep an adequate distance between buddies. Evaluate the possibility of having a completely separate alternative gas source.
Takeaways from this series. While being equipped with a completely separate source of gas to be used in a low or out-of-gas scenario is probably the best option, the reality is that it is not always possible to adopt this solution. This makes us more susceptible to external factors, such as our buddy, and the huge number of options available that causes us to lose ourselves in the game of luck. Frequent review of these options, as well as an evaluation of our buddy, will help us be aware and more prepared to face a situation, even though there is no guarantee of success. Two divers, equally cooperating to manage an out-of-gas scenario, is not always what occurs in real life. Sometimes it is the faster, prompt, and more active diver who leads the procedure, leaving the other to passively accept it. It is better to be the diver who leads the resolution instead of the one who has to passively accept it. A pre-dive discussion should be done, even more often and detailed, when we dive with new buddies. But a frequent review of the available options will make the difference, and this review can even be done alone, without a buddy, whom we may not even have. It may also be done out of water with a mental review.
Thank you for watching. In case you did not see them, please find in the description of this video the links to the previous episodes of this series, and if necessary, find also a link to a downloadable summary. Remember that by clicking on the bell and by subscribing, you will be informed about new videos, while by sharing and giving a like to this video, you will help to spread greater awareness among divers.